You do these things that help you or hurt you.
Yeah.
And when you start to recognize what they are, then you have a choice. Am I willing to sacrifice my focus in order to have this thing?
Well, hello again. Welcome back to Hale Fitness Podcast. I get to be your host again today. I'm Coach Katie, and I'm joined by
Coach Jay.
Awesome. So today we're going to talk about alcohol a little bit. And the reason we're going to talk about it is because about 105 days ago,
105 exactly, huh?
not that we've been counting, but 105 days ago, Coach Jay posed this challenge to me, and he said, hey, would you be interested in going in on not smoking till the end of the year, and for me, not drinking till the end of the year?
So me not drinking.
That's right.
Yes.
You not drinking till the end of the year.
Yep.
And I was like, well, shoot, this seems like a good idea. Without much thought, I was like, yes, these are things that we're both trying to do. Let's do it together. And for some reason at the time, I didn't really do the math on like how long it was until the end of the year. And then about a month rolled by and I was like, wait, we said the end of the year.
That's several more months.
That's like 7 months. Anyway, so today I kind of wanted to use this podcast to check in with you on you're 100 days in now to this challenge that you set for yourself. And I want to know how it's going. And I especially want to know a lot of things.
Okay.
But I'm going to ask you some questions about how that's been going. And then towards the end of the podcast, if we don't get to some of them, I want to make sure we answer some questions that'll come up with a lot of clients about alcohol.
So this will be like the podcast about alcohol then?
Yeah.
Yeah, excellent. I love it. All right,
Awesome.
well, I'm glad I have some now.
What you got in that mug?
It's just coffee. It's just coffee. Just regular coffee. Yeah, so fire away.
Awesome. So the first thing that I want to know is, why did you choose to do this?
So I have my relationship with alcohol is like it's like most people, right? I haven't had any like problems with it. I started drinking when I was 22, which is actually kind of late, but I didn't drink that much until I was 22. And then I would drink, on the weekends or whatever. And, you go on vacation, you maybe drink a little bit more, but I would never consider myself like a heavy drinker.
Yeah.
Maybe once a week, maybe, 2 days of a weekend.
Yeah.
But as I got older, I started to find that 1 day a week of drinking, like maybe, for me, it's like 3 drinks, maybe. It would impact my appetite and impact my mood for like 3 days afterwards.
Yeah.
And, that started happening in my 30s and it got really tough in my 40s. And so it would be this thing of like, I would be really sticking to my nutrition. Everything would go really well. And then I would have, even just like 2 beers or like whatever, 2 anything. And, for several days I would crave sugar. I would want to eat more and like my sleep would be impacted. My performance wouldn't be so great. And so I have had periods in my life where I stopped drinking for 6 weeks, 8 weeks, whatever.
Yeah.
And I think probably the longest I've gone is maybe 4 or 5 months, something like that.
Okay.
And I just thought, I'm not drinking that much now.
Yeah.
This would be a good time to just give it up for a while. And of course, this was like a day after I had something to drink.
Right. Yeah. And you're feeling it.
Yeah. And it's like, the thing is, I don't even drink so much as to get like a real hangover.
Yeah.
But it's just like a general feeling of crappiness.
Yeah.
And so I woke up that Sunday or Saturday, I don't remember what it was. And I was just like, you know what? I'm just not going to do this anymore for a while.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. It reminds me of this. My sister and I used to go to these concerts when we were in high school. Anyways, there's this like all ages venue. One of the groups that we liked following was this band called the Kooks. And it was like, oh, do you know these guys?
Yeah.
Oh, it's so funny. But then they had this song called No Such Thing as a 3-Beer Buzz. And every time I drink, I think of that.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
But you're describing like, oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't have that much. Only 3
Only
beers.
3 beers.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm
Yeah.
I'm a pretty big dude, so 3 beers is kind of a,
Yeah.
Like that's not a big night. A big night would be like 9 beers.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So God,
Yeah.
I can't even imagine drinking 9 beers. Right
Amazing,
now.
right?
Yeah.
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 Yeah. 3 beers for me is I'm puking, essentially. What can I say? There's definitely a 3 beer buzz. There's like a 1.5 beer buzz for me.
Yeah.
There's like a 3 sip buzz. Okay. Yeah. Anyway, so you were feeling like, hey, this isn't a thing that I'm doing that much. And it's just kind of making me feel crappy even more than it used to. So let me try this and see what happens.
Yeah. And, since then, I mean, since the last time I did this for 8 weeks or whatever, there's been a lot more kind of talk about people quitting and like some of the benefits and some of the ways it kind of impacts your brain and stuff. And one of the things I remember listening to was, I think it was Andrew Huberman who was talking about how like when you drink even just once a week, then your body produces more cortisol. And so you tend to have this like low level anxiety all the time.
Yeah.
And I was like, ooh, I don't want that.
Yeah, that's right.
And so I was like, I don't need this.
Yeah.
So let me just cut it out for a while and see how it feels.
Yeah, that's so interesting.
Yeah.
I was reading about this too, how there's this molecule in your brain called GABA, GABA, and it essentially buffers cortisol. And when you drink, you produce GABA in excess. So at first you feel like this deep calm, or you almost feel this sedative effect. But then what happens is your GABA gets depleted. You've used all of it.
Right.
And so then when you come to have a stressful day the next day, you have nothing to buffer against that.
Right.
And you're just feeling it all. And so a lot of the mood swings comes from like increased cortisol and then less ability to kind of change it or buffer it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Super
I didn't think
interesting.
about that. Yeah.
So then I guess my question is, what's your experience been like? And I'm particularly interested in what was the first 2 weeks like?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, again, I didn't drink that much. So it's not, this is not like a big revolutionary thing. I will say that the day that I decided to do it was the day after I had a few drinks.
Right.
And so I wasn't feeling like amazing.
Yeah.
And so the first week or so, I wasn't really feeling that great.
Yeah.
And it also wasn't that hard. And this was like a Sunday. I don't usually drink Monday through,
Right.
Thursday, right?
Right.
And so it wasn't that hard. It only kind of started to feel hard on like Friday or Saturday.
Yeah.
Then it's like, oh, I'm not going to do this thing that I did last week or the week before or the week before. And so, I felt that sort of kind of down feeling that I had for 3 days after drinking. And then I started to feel normal again. And then when I started, this is like almost like a cycle of addiction, actually.
Yeah.
When I started to feel good, then you're like, oh, what would be awesome right now is to have a drink.
Yeah, that's right.
And so, so I just did something else instead. I don't remember what I did, but yeah, so it was actually getting through that first week that felt like the Monday of the next week. I was like, oh, I feel better than I did the previous Monday.
Yeah.
That's where I really started to notice it.
Yeah.
And so, so yeah, I mean, it wasn't like hard, but there were a couple of times where I was like, oh, it would be nice to have a drink right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I just didn't.
Yeah. And then did that change as you went on? Did those like Friday, Saturday, Sundays become easier, or has it still been something that you think about?
It took about 3-4 weeks before I stopped having this feeling like, oh, I'm happy and relaxed. It would be great to have, whatever, a glass of wine or, I'm not too discriminating when it comes to alcohol.
Blue Moon.
All right, well, not
Some
that.
Coors Light. It'd be really
okay,
great right
I
now.
guess I am discriminating. But like, it's like the sun will be shining. Oh man, it'd be awesome to have a cold beer right now. It's like, oh, we're, going to this party. It'd be nice to have a, whatever. What are those seltzers? The hard seltzer.
Hard seltzer, right. Yeah.
Oh, I want to unwind. It'd be nice to have a whiskey this evening or whatever. And so it took about 4 weeks before I stopped having this sort of like, hey, it'd be nice to have this, and then it just became a little more just noise in the background.
Yeah.
But like there was definitely this sort of feeling of like, I want this and this is going to make me feel better. And it came up week after week.
Yeah.
Yeah. So about 4 weeks in, then it started to dissipate.
I mean, that's pretty That's pretty great. And granted, you weren't drinking a ton before.
Yeah.
But interesting that, because I think when I pose this as an option sometimes to my clients, there's a lot of fear around, but like that, man, I feel like I do so much during the week, and like that is my gift to myself.
Yeah.
That is how I relax, and that is how I've relaxed in the 20 plus years that I've been legally, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
drinking adult.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of fear around like what's going to happen if I get rid of that. Like, am I going to be able to relax? And am I going to be able to like enjoy my Friday in the same way?
Yeah.
And you're kind of saying like, well, for me, 4 weeks in, I had found these other things to do, and I was like less occupied with that thought.
Yeah. The one thing for me, so two things. Number one, I'm not telling you that this is something that you should do, right? And I'm not even saying that I'm going to give up drinking forever.
Yeah.
It's more just like, let me try this and see how it goes.
Yeah.
And there's been a few realizations that we'll get to from that. But, the second thing is I also didn't change a bunch of other stuff, right? It's like I wasn't, I was kind of like a little more loose on what I ate. Yeah. And so it'd be like, okay, great. Like I might have, that same feeling of relaxation. I might go and have my favorite, Mexican food or something like that, right?
Totally.
Or, like I don't feel like in this box of restriction where I can't have anything. It's just this one thing that I'm avoiding.
Yeah.
Right. And so that kind of helped because in the past I've done this where I give up everything. And I'm just like, and then everything feels like just such a grind.
Yeah, totally.
And so this time it was a little bit more like a little bit gentler.
Yeah, right.
And what's interesting about that is like so a couple things that I found helped was it's crazy how much walk will help.
Yeah.
Going on a long walk really helped.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like, oh my God, I'm so stressed, I need to go for this long walk. It was just like, I just started walking more. And then it became, that is a thing that I like doing. And then I made an effort to really get out in the sunshine in general.
Yeah.
And that also made me feel more relaxed. I played with my kids a little bit more. That also helped. Obviously we work out here. That also helped. It's, again, I don't want to overblow this. It's not like, oh my God, I'm like so, needing this. Yeah. But it was just like, you feel those feelings and then you end up doing something else. Yeah. And eventually you realize like, oh, these feelings, like this prompt, whatever it is, the activity can be replaced with something else.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's funny that you mentioned that because I found the same thing with smoking. It's like, oh man, as that craving would arise late in the day, it's like, two things. Like one, it doesn't last very long.
Yeah.
It feels like it's going to. You think it's going to. Like if I don't act now, like this is just going to persist, and it just doesn't.
Yeah.
And sometimes it just takes getting through that a few times to be able to trust that it's not going to last forever.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is like just having less lenience. I mean, I'm a sucker for trail mix and M&Ms. Freaking love them.
Yeah.
And during this period of time, I'm like, you know what? If that is my alternative to having a smoke right now, I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
Perfectly happy with that.
Yeah.
So it's that like playing around with what is going to help me do this thing that's going to serve me more, that I want to be doing more right now.
Yeah, that's right.
So I guess I'm curious then, like what have you felt the impact being? Like you kind of did this because you wanted to feel better in general. You wanted to see what it was like. Like what did you learn?
Yeah, it's a great question. One is, I mean, low key, kind of when I gave this up, I thought, okay, great, a couple of weeks of this, and then everything is going to be like so much better, right?
Man.
And I'm not saying it wasn't. Things were better, but it didn't happen as fast as I wanted it to, right? It took me like 6 weeks before I was like, okay, I feel like I have more consistent energy.
Yeah.
I feel like better on a day-to-day basis. Let me start making some other changes,
Yeah.
which is the real reason why I wanted to do it in the first place.
Yeah.
It was just like, actually, I want to make other changes. Yeah. And this is one thing that makes other things harder, right? Yeah. And I'm always like, I don't know if the word is lazy. I'm always looking for the path of least resistance,
Yeah.
right? So what is the thing that I can do that makes everything else easier?
Yeah.
And that's why I chose this.
Yeah.
It was like, this will make everything else easier. I will not be fighting these feelings and these cravings and stuff that I would have if I have alcohol.
Yeah.
So I gave it up. And maybe it wasn't 6 weeks. It took about 30 days or so where I was like, okay, let's make some other changes. And, I started kind of dialing in some of my sleep and dialing in, how much protein I was eating and, started dialing a bunch of other stuff in.
Yeah.
But, the whole point was for me to feel mentally like I was ready to take whatever the next step was. So 30 days in, made that choice, and then, started kind of doing all the things that I know work in other areas.
Yeah.
And then as soon as that started happening, like another 2 to 4 weeks, then it's just like everything's just clicking. And that was really the point.
Yeah.
Looking back, part of the reason I did this is like I have gone through periods of like super high focus and discipline, and then like periods where I'm less focused and disciplined. And looking back on my food logs and all the the things that I've done, the number one thing that takes me off is drinking.
Yeah.
And it's not even that much drinking.
Yeah.
It's like over the holidays, you go to like,
Right.
4 parties over 4 weeks.
Yeah.
And then you drink 1 or 2 extra times. So now I'm drinking like 8 times in the course of a month.
Yeah.
That's enough to send me off for like 3 months. That's how it works.
Yeah.
And, I'm not going to pretend that I'm like this super disciplined person. It's more just like, you like you do these things that help you or hurt you.
Yeah.
And when you start to recognize what they are, then you have a choice.
Yeah.
Am I willing to like sacrifice, my focus in order to have this thing?
Right.
So it took me about 30 days and then another 30 days of focusing on other habits. And then it was just like, I stopped thinking about alcohol most of the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not that I thought about it that much.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's a decision that you're making, once, twice, 3 times every week. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So when when the decision is no,
Yeah.
you don't think about it as much.
Yeah. It frees your mind to think about other things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is kind of an interesting impact, which does take a little bit of time to really like settle in.
Yep.
Is kind of what I'm hearing you say. Like there was some immediate impact of, well, I was kind of feeling bad when I made this decision to stop.
Yeah.
And I stopped, and after that weekend, like, oh, my Monday felt better than it has in the past. But beyond that, it gets kind of hard to quantify, like, okay, I'm doing this thing because I want to feel better and more productive, but like nostalgia is real. And it's like, it's really easy to forget that, oh, right, it used to be on Monday, Tuesday, maybe even Wednesday, I'm kind of like coming out of this funk from the weekend. And when it's not there, sometimes it's hard.
You don't remember.
You don't remember.
Yeah.
You don't remember. And this is where I think you do a really good job of, you make yourself remember because you have these ways of tracking. You have a visual that sits right in front of you that's like, I fill in this box every day that I follow this habit. And so it's a reminder on Monday, oh, right, I didn't do that thing. Oh.
Yeah. That's the game that I set up to make it, to make me want to keep doing it. Because it's like, you can stop for 2-3 weeks and then you're like, okay, I feel better. And then you kind of go back into it and then you just have this cycle that you repeat.
Yeah.
But the game that I play is like, okay, I'm going to go until the end of the year, which in the end was like 200 and something days.
Yeah.
And it's like, great, let's get to the first 30 days and then the first, 45 days and then 60 days or, whatever, then 100 days. Oh, we're halfway there. And it's like this game. And it's like, at this point, the game doesn't require any effort, but I'm still winning.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's why I set those things up.
Yeah. That's great. One of the things I wonder about, because it comes up with a lot of clients, which is, it sounds simple on its surface to make this change of, I'm not going to drink for you at all, which was, dropping down from 3, 2, or 1 days to 0 days.
Yep.
And seems simple. And in practice, for some people, there are other things that come up that make this really challenging. And that is this recognition. And there are a few clients that come to mind that when I decide not to do that, what I'm deciding no to is actually this friend group who that's our main activity of socializing. Or this environment that I'm used to being in no longer is really like set up to serve me in that way.
Yeah.
And so what I'm curious about is like, when you made this decision, did it impact at all like who you hung around with or how you interacted with people?
Yeah. I mean, I definitely have an environment that supports healthy habits and that's on purpose.
Yeah.
Right. I have that at home because I set it up. I have it here as my job because, I run a gym. So it's not like we have this environment where we're constantly encouraging each other to drink.
Right.
Right. I mean, every so often we'll have events or whatever, but like there's plenty of people that go to those events and don't have anything to drink. Right. So it's not like a huge thing. A couple of things on this, like what I realized over the course of this 100 days is it's not how many days you do it, it's how many times you say no. And like really, if you think about it, it's, 105 days or whatever, that's like 14 plus weeks, right?
Right.
So I probably only said no like 10 times.
Yeah.
Because it's like I wouldn't drink every single week and sometimes it doesn't even come up. And so it's like, there's 10 times where I felt a craving and I said no.
Yeah.
So I've actually only practiced this thing 10 times.
Yeah. Right.
It's 100 days, but it's only 10 times. Right. And so if I really wanted to give it up forever, then I would want to practice it probably 100 times, which means that we're talking about like a year or more of saying no.
Right.
100 times, that's 2 years, right?
Yeah.
Of saying no so that I have had every situation where I can say no. Right. And I think that's, when you talk about like how to moderate it and stuff like that, that's the part that's hard is like, first of all, deciding whether I'm going to say yes or no.
Yeah.
And then what does the no actually mean,
Right.
et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Right. And so what I'm doing here is tracking the number of days. I'm not tracking the number of times I've said no. But it's like, I'm really just practicing saying no to this thing.
Yeah.
Right. That's answers a completely different question. But back to your question of like, did I have to change anything in my environment? Like, not a huge amount, but it did change like the type of activities that I would do.
Yeah.
And I tend to be the one who kind of invites people to stuff or whatever. And so I wouldn't be inviting people to, go to the bar or go to the brewery or whatever.
Yeah.
And like even, this is going to sound bad, but even my kids, right? They like going to the beer garden with me or, whatever. We play cards. I have a couple of beers. They have like, some pizza or whatever. They love that.
Yeah.
Right. And, we'd say, I'd say, hey, where do you guys want to eat? And they're like, oh, we're going to go to field work or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like, no, we're not doing that, And I kind of realized that I was starting to teach them that this was the way things go. And I'm not really like kids are going to do what they do.
Yeah.
And I don't feel guilty about it or anything, but it's just like, I'm teaching them that, when we want to relax and have a good time, we're going to the brewery.
Yeah. Right.
Right. There's other things we could do. So let's just start doing those things.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And it's cool to see the way you've like created that atmosphere other ways. Like you guys now, I don't know, you go down to like the public market in Emeryville and it's got a very similar kind of vibe.
Yeah.
It's like people are hanging out outside, like it feels very social. And yet like you can be there and it doesn't center around drinking and you guys can still play games. So it's interesting to see the ways that like you have found to get that same kind of like joyful interaction with your kids. That's like,
yeah. All right. Bring them to the gym. We go out and do things. So yeah, that's part of it. I would say, I have had friends in the past where our relationship was more based around drinking.
Yeah.
And I don't really hang out with them anymore. And it's not, that happened a long time ago before this, but like I don't hang out with them anymore, mostly because like when you start to grow in one direction and the people are going in another direction, it's like at some point you have to make a choice.
yeah.
Do I want to continue to grow in this direction or do I want to go in their direction? Because there's going to be a pull one way or the other.
Yeah, that's right.
And so, great. Let's find a way to kind of replace what I was getting in this interaction with this one.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So you have done a really good job of like setting up your environment, whether it's the people that you're hanging around with or where you're hanging around, that has made it easier to make the decisions you want to make.
Yeah, that's not easy to do.
No.
I'm not gonna say this is like a super easy thing.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, I can feel the same thing. Like around smoking, we were talking about it a little bit. And it's like, well, it used to be that the industry that I worked in, it was everywhere. In tree work, that's just part of the culture. Everyone smokes, so it's the norm. Yeah. And then similarly, like living in a bunch of neighborhoods where that's the norm. You just walk down the street and you smell it.
Yeah.
It's like the normal thing to do on an evening or a weeknight. People are out socializing and doing it.
Yep.
And sometimes I remember feeling some guilt and shame over the fact that it was so hard for me to resist because I felt like it was just me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, lo and behold, I moved to a neighborhood now where that's not the norm. And in fact, if I were to stand out on the sidewalk and smoke, it would be really looked at as weird, right?
Yeah.
And it's interesting, I'm realizing how much of a difference that makes.
Makes a huge difference.
It makes a huge difference.
Yep.
I feel a lot less compelled to do it. There are fewer triggers or reminders of how nice it is or whatnot. And again, I didn't make that decision to move predicated on the fact that I wanted to stop smoking consistently, but it's just been an interesting impact.
Yeah. When I lived in the UK, this whole idea of a beer garden, almost every bar is kind of a beer garden.
Yeah.
It's you go to the pub and people will be outside drinking.
Yeah.
Right. And, sometimes smoking as well, but there'd be so many people because it was in London. And it was just this culture of drinking. And that's what it felt like. Mm-hmm. Now, the truth is there's 13 million people.
Right.
Not everybody drinks,
right.
But there's enough of them that are doing it that where you're kind of okay, well, this is what people do. Mm-hmm. And I definitely started drinking more when I got there because it was just the thing you do.
Yeah.
Right. And people, you hang out at the pub, bring your work to the pub.
Yeah.
And you have a couple of beers while you're doing your work.
Yeah.
And, it was interesting. A couple of times I came back here and I'm where's the bar? And then I would go to a bar and it was this is not the same. This is kind of sad. And it's not. And it was oh, right. This is a different culture.
Yeah.
Funny thing, the culture here has shifted a little more towards drinking friendly. There's a lot more craft breweries, a lot more there's wineries everywhere now.
Yeah, right.
There's all this fancy bars and themes. It's a lot more around drinking.
It's actually, some places are very inviting.
Yeah.
These open air places. It's not all okay, I'm going to Club Mallard and I'm in this dark, dingy place that doesn't feel great. And there's stuffed heads on the walls looking at me,
Yeah, that's right. And so, that's the thing. And it's a funny thing, no judgment around alcohol or whatever, but if it was illegal, a lot of the other drugs are, and you made a list of here's all the drugs we're going to make legal based on how safe they are, alcohol would not be at the top of that list. It would be pretty far down the list. Yeah. There would be things that are currently illegal that we would make legal before we made alcohol, right? And so, it is kind of this thing where it's a fun thing, but you're also making a lot of choices when you do it. So
yeah. There's so many areas that I want to dive into.
Yeah,
here.
Let's do it.
One thing that I want to come back to is what you said about how I've been doing this for 100 days, but really I've only made 10 decisions.
Yeah.
And I think that I just want to tie that to whatever habit you're working on. Is this is often the reality, which is that you may your whether or not you stick with it, whether or not you're consistent, often comes down to these singular decisions you make that have these broader ranging impacts. And it's kind of a tricky thing because on one hand, you could say, well, I make all these different decisions. What does this one matter? And then on the other hand, it's actually that decision to take that extra hour on your Sunday when you're kind of tired and do your meal prep is the decision that matters.
Yep. Yeah.
So it's kind of sometimes for people, it's why don't you identify what are those key decisions that you make during the week? That key decision at 3 p.m. not to go to the snack room in the office. Maybe that for you is the main decision that you have to focus on every day.
Yeah.
Right? Or maybe it's that decision on Saturday night when your partner wants to go out. Maybe that is the decision.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting you mentioned that. The only time I can think clearly to make those decisions is when I haven't had alcohol for a while. I wouldn't say the only time, but I have more time to think clearly when I'm not drinking alcohol or recovering from drinking alcohol.
Yeah.
It's like if my Mondays, if I haven't had a drink for 2 weeks and I go in on Monday, it's I'll have epiphanies like that. It's I just did my food prep last Sunday for the 15th week in a row.
Right.
And I realize when I do my food prep now, there's a key thing that I do that just gets the whole thing started.
Yeah.
And that's just put water in a giant pot.
Yeah.
And if I do that, then the whole thing just happens.
Yeah.
And it's how many times did I have to do the prep before it became that automatic?
Yeah. Right.
And it was probably at least 50 or 100 times.
Yeah.
The first time I did it, it was just like, oh my God, I'm like holding, the recipe and trying to figure it all out. But once you kind of do it, it becomes the thing that you do.
Yeah.
But let's call it 50 times. That's a whole year of food prep every single week.
Yeah.
So you got to do it for a whole year to make it actually stick.
Yeah.
And so I think there are, like you said, a lot of key things like that where it's like, do you, back when I was 300 pounds, it's like, do you stop at the grocery store and buy ice cream on the way home?
That's right. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Right. Yeah.
And it's like, you can be good and not do it one day, and you could be good and not do it another day, but can you do it on a Friday or a Saturday after a stressful week of work?
Yeah.
And really it's like, maybe Monday through Thursday don't even count because you weren't doing that anyway.
Yeah.
Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, those are the 3 actual reps of saying no.
Yeah, that's right.
Right?
Yeah.
And then, like you said, it's those cravings, they come up, you let them pass, and then you realize like, oh, I do have some control over this. And ultimately for me, this comes down to not so much discipline, but more like control. Do I actually have control over my actions as much as I like to think I do?
Yeah.
And if I can't go more than a week or 2 without drinking alcohol, then maybe I don't.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So that's the question I ask myself.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And you have a very like visceral reaction to whenever you feel like, oh shoot, this thing might have more control over me than I have control over it.
So that's a really helpful thing to have in some situations. So this is great actually. Like, one of the personality traits that I have is I don't like to follow rules. I'm really not great with rules. Is part of why I run my own business, right? And I don't like to follow rules that other people give me. I don't like to follow rules that I give myself, right? And that serves you really well when you want to start a business, or if you are looking for like innovative solutions to problems. It doesn't serve you well if you work for somebody because they're always going to give you things to do. And it doesn't serve you well if like, you are trying to have some sort of long-term structured goal be achieved, right? Yeah. And so you have to learn how to kind of manage your relationship with rules.
Yeah.
So one of the things for me is looking at like, how much control do I feel like I have over today and tomorrow and the next sort of 3 months?
Yeah. And
because I'm somebody who doesn't like to follow rules, I look for ways to like, let's say I have a goal for the next 3 months or 6 months. How do I set up the environment so that it supports me to get to those goals?
Yeah.
And then it doesn't feel like restriction.
A rule that I have to follow.
Yeah.
That's so good.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really good. I love this. Like, I love this framing. It's a very useful reframe. So for you, it is maybe what I want in effect is not to drink for the next 100 days, not to drink for the remainder of the year. Yeah. And on the outset, that feels like a rule. But your reframe is like, actually, this is me taking back power, or this is me having some control where before I may have not felt like I had that same kind of control.
Yeah.
And I have felt the same way around emotions and the way I react emotionally to different situations. And it's like, the reframe for me is for a long time, it was like, wow, when someone says something that triggers me, I have a reaction to it. And I want to change that, but I don't want to force myself to be like, be stoic, Katie, and like, don't react, right? And that's not me.
Yeah.
But what the reframe that has been really useful to me is like, I love my autonomy just as much as you do. Yeah. And so for me, it's like, I don't want to let that person have power over me. Yeah. And so actually, this isn't about restricting my emotional reaction. This is about me saying I have the power over my own emotions. Yeah. And your reaction. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. So it's just like a fun little, reframe that can work. And that's it. Like, again, this kind of comes back to like, why give up alcohol? It's like, when I'm thinking clearly, stuff like that pops into my head. I'm like, oh, that's a great way to change the way I live my life. When I'm like, oh my God, I just got to get through this day, then you don't have time to think about that kind of thing. No. Right. And like, I feel, and it could be anything that drains your energy. Right. So for me, alcohol was something that drained my energy, but it could be like you're working at a terrible job and your boss is just constantly on you and it's draining your energy. Right.
if you're constantly reacting to that, then you don't have a chance to think about what you actually want.
That's right.
Yeah.
So I have some more questions about your experience. And one of them is related to the fact that you also have these other goals, right? So you are in a period of time where you're trying to lose fat. And so when you decide to stop drinking, was that at all influenced by the fact that like, hey, I also have these other body goals?
It was. I mean, I'll have like, if I was a bodybuilder, then you would say I have this like bulking cycle and this cutting cycle. And I usually have those every year, usually one or two of them. I'm not a bodybuilder. So it's really just I get fat and then I lose some weight. That's basically what happens. But like usually like I kind of vacillate between, let's say 235 pounds is like my heaviest nowadays, and then down to about 215. So it's like I'll gain and lose around the same 20 pounds. And what happens is there'll be times where I'm like, okay, it's time to like make a change. Usually like in the past, not the last few years, but before, I would just like white knuckle it, right? Like I would just be like, we're doing it all in the next 6 weeks. And I've successfully been able to do that, but it's painful. And the rebound back to, the heavier weight is way faster. And so what I found is that now if I start slower and build over time, then it sticks longer. And actually that weight range used to be like between 250 and 220, right? And now it's down to between 235 and like 215, 210, something like that, right? And it's like part of the reason for that is because I take a little bit slower approach to get there. And that means that my habits develop a little more strongly. And I keep them longer. Right. Just side note, if you're the kind of person that if you're like me, like you gain weight, you lose weight or whatever, there's really no like finish line. It's something that you want to be conscious of. And just because your goal was to lose and then you didn't lose, you ended up gaining, it doesn't mean that you failed. It just means that's part of the journey. All right. You're going to go up, you're going to go down. Right. So anyway, so that was part of it. And really it was like, I didn't change my diet. I just cut out alcohol. And I only changed my diet about 45 days in. And that's when I started just kind of hitting my numbers. And then I started really hitting my numbers, and then it started to happen a little faster.
Okay. So the reason I ask is because a lot of people will ask that question, and we ask it a lot of clients, which is like, can I drink and lose fat?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you absolutely can. I would say that like if that's what I wanted to do, I would have. That's what I would do. I would just track, what the alcohol that I was consuming was, and make sure that I kind of worked around it. The reason I cut it out completely is because it just makes it easier. Right. It's just like if I'm kind of like holding my breath all week, waiting for like Saturday, and where I can have a drink and then eat whatever I want, then it's like I have to dial up my discipline so much more on Sunday to stick with it, and then keep it up on Monday, and then finally feel okay by maybe Wednesday, and then feel like, okay, this is going well. I can't wait to do it all again. And so that's why I did it that way. Now, look, I was also 100 pounds heavier. So like there's definitely some stuff there. Right. For other people, it may just like, I'll have a glass of wine every night. It doesn't really matter. So I would never say just give it up. But it just made it easier for me because it made my behavior like easier to execute. I could just do the same thing and it would be fine.
That's definitely what I see too, is that like it can be done. And I've had clients who have done it. And
I've done it.
Yeah, you've done it. So like it can be done. Is it the easiest way to do it? Probably not. No. It's like the reality is when you drink, there are all these other decisions now that have to be made that are hard decisions. It's like, I know for a lot of people, and like myself included, I drink a lot. And then for me, it's a lot, like a couple beers or whatever. But then suddenly it's like, well, now I want nachos. So it's like, if I were not to make that decision, that'd be a really hard decision to make in that moment.
Yeah.
And then there's that impact of, and then the next day when I kind of feel like trash and I'm dehydrated and my mood is low, to make good decisions around food or to prep my meals for that week suddenly becomes this like mountain that I have to climb.
Yep.
Versus if I hadn't done that the night before, it's way easier to make those decisions.
Yeah. Can I tell you how like an adult would do it? Not
Okay.
like a, this is how I've done it,
Okay.
right? So like, I don't drink at night really. Cause like, it's not like I got to sleep. I usually got to get up early, whatever. So for me, it's like Saturday at like 1 or 2 o'clock where I'm just like, my week is kind of done. Cause we coach and do stuff, and then you're done like noon, whatever, on Saturday. And then like 1 or 2 o'clock, I'm like, yeah, what'd be great is like go to, like a whatever field work that's like mostly empty, right? And have a couple of beers, maybe with my kids. We'll play cards or whatever. Have a couple of beers. I'll be done drinking at like 3, 4 o'clock.
Yeah.
And then we'll go get, Barney's.
Yeah.
Like we'll have burgers or something for dinner. And maybe we'll have frozen yogurt, right?
Yeah.
Right? And then I'll be asleep by 9:30. It's not a great sleep, but then I wake up the next day and it's just like, hey, let's go to the farmer's market. Maybe we'll get like croissants, or hey, let's do, a breakfast today. We'll get a loaf of bread and we'll have, sausage and eggs and, and whatever, like sometimes mimosas.
Yeah.
Right. And it's just like, it's going to be okay. It's only, we just did the half day and then another half day.
Yeah.
And then I'll do meal prep on Sunday night and, it'll be fine.
Yeah.
And that's what I would do.
Yeah.
And so what's funny about that is like, it feels like sustainable. And here's the thing, like you could make this work, but when I tracked all that stuff, I realized that I was eating, let's say 2,500 to 3,000 calories Monday through Friday.
Yeah.
And then on Saturday, I would push it to 4,000. And on Sunday, it would be another 4,000.
Yeah.
And so I was eating an extra 2,000 calories a week. And that meant that instead of eating, let's say, 3,000 calories a day, I was eating more like 3,400 calories a day on average over the course of a week.
Yeah.
400 calories a day is like an extra pound of fat each week. And it's like you do that week after week.
Yeah.
Versus like maybe I cut that down to 2,800. Now I'm not gaining that extra pound. I'm losing an extra pound of fat each week. That stuff would add up. And it would add up so subtly that you wouldn't notice it until you're like, wow, I
Look back.
like, I'm gaining weight. What the heck?
Yeah.
I'm only taking Saturday afternoon and Sunday morning off.
Yeah.
What the heck's going on?
Totally.
And then it's like, that's interesting.
It's so frustrating.
Yeah.
Like I know so many people who are in that boat, which is like, man, I do so well during the week and I don't even feel like I'm going off the rails on the weekend.
Yeah.
Having a drink or two, I'm like maybe going out once with my family, but that doesn't feel crazy.
Yeah.
That feels pretty normal.
Yeah.
And yet now I'm really frustrated because I'm not seeing the progress that I want to see on the scale.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's how it was happening for me.
Yeah.
And, luckily I was tracking the stuff and I could see it and it was just like, oh, okay. If I give up this thing, then I won't make all these other choices. Great. I'll just, stick with it. And sometimes I still do some of that stuff.
Yeah.
Like we still go to Barney's. I'll sometimes still have, whatever loaf of bread in the morning. But like a couple little decisions and all of a sudden those things are only 500 calories more, not 1,000 calories more.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So little decisions for you
Are different
Yeah.
because I've made this one decision.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So then for someone who is curious, like,
Should I give up alcohol?
Yeah. Yeah. How would you help them make that decision?
Yeah, it's a good one. I think it always starts with awareness. If you pay attention to what you're eating, let's say you're tracking it, you're taking food, you're keeping a food journal or whatever, and you start to notice that your pattern changes after you drink alcohol, then you may consider giving it up for, let's say, 2-3 weeks and see if your pattern stays the same or if it changes.
Yeah.
Right. And then it's sort of like I like to use this sort of scientific method. It's like, my hypothesis is this, right?
Yeah.
So my hypothesis was if I give up alcohol, then I will make better decisions just by default,
Yeah.
right? That was my hypothesis. So I tested it and I said, well, okay, I've given it up for 30 days. Let's see if we can go for longer than that. And once I did it, I started to see the better decisions being made, and it reinforced that initial hypothesis. The conclusion is it's probably better for me to not drink than it is for me to drink, right?
Yeah.
And revolutionary. It's not better to not drink than to drink, but it's just like for my fitness goals, for my mental health, for my business, it's better for me to not drink than to drink.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And
go ahead.
And so if someone were to ask me, should I try this? It's like, what does the data say?
Yeah. Yeah.
Does it like how does drinking impact your other decisions?
That's right.
And if you think it negatively impacts, then let's just try it for a period of time that makes sense for you.
Yeah.
I would say 2 weeks is a minimum. Probably go for 4 weeks to see if you could actually make a change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's so good. And that point of like, well, I mean, there's a couple of things there. One, which is like, there wasn't all of this guilt. You weren't like guilting yourself or shaming yourself for the fact that like, I'm drinking and I think like, this is impacting my ability to do X, Y, or Z. Like, I'm a bad person. I'm out of control.
To be clear, I've done that in the past and it's not effective.
Yeah.
Like I can use shame to drive myself to do things, and I will do the thing.
Yeah.
And guess what happens? Like I'll do the thing, got there.
Yeah.
6 months later, all that progress is undone.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, well, that didn't work.
That didn't.
Right. So
Try something else.
Yeah, I'm going to try something else. So, shame is effective to get you an outcome. It's not maybe an effective way to live your life.
Yeah. Right.
So,
yeah,
sorry.
That's good. No, that's great. But this idea of like, okay, well, I have this idea, this one thing that I'm going to try changing because I think it's this keystone thing for me.
Yeah.
Let me try it and see what happens. And for you, you found that it was effective or useful. It got you a result that you wanted. Then for somebody else, they might actually find that it's not worth it.
Yeah.
Actually, what I'm having to give up, whether it's this friendship or this social experience or this feeling of relaxation at night or whatever it is, actually isn't worth it.
Yep.
And you may be able to find some way to integrate it into your, call it body change or fat loss or performance goals.
Yep.
In a way where you can still make progress on those things too.
Yep.
But you might not. And at that point, like what I find is where there's real tension for people is where there's this sense of like, I want to be making progress on these goals and I don't want to give up this thing.
Yeah.
And at a certain point, it's like, well, there has to be a decision made. And it is okay to make the decision if I don't want to give up these things. It just means like, great, then maybe I change the goal or what I have in mind is where I want to be. And that is a perfectly valid thing to do.
Yeah. 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 That's absolutely right. It just comes down to like, what is the most important thing for you? And to be clear, like my grandfather died when he was 86. He drank whiskey every night and he had ice cream every night.
Yeah.
And it was just like, that's just how he ate.
Yeah.
And he lived a happy life. And, I mean, he had health problems, when he died, but like, hey, I'll take that when you're 86, right?
Yeah.
And so, it's not that it can't be done.
Yeah.
It's just that, you make these decisions about what works best for you.
Totally.
Yeah.
There's actually, I think that oftentimes too, there's confusion around that of like, I feel like I hear recommendations that like a glass of wine every night is great for me,
That's bullshit. I will tell you that is absolutely bullshit. Yeah. So I'm going to tell you what I've learned about that.
Yeah.
The is it resveratrol or something?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The amount of resveratrol in a glass of wine, like you would have to drink like 10 gallons of wine to get enough for it to actually have a benefit for you.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's just marketing that the wine industry gives you. It's just like, yeah, you get this extract from grapes. Yeah. Okay. But you're also getting blasted.
Yeah.
So
so interesting, right?
Yeah.
And there was this big like meta-analysis of all these research studies that was done. It was like 100 research studies that were done across 26 countries. And it was looking at this question of, does drinking and what amount of drinking gives you the least amount of risk for heart disease down the line? This is heart disease specifically.
Yeah.
And it was like, the result was interesting, which is basically, if you are not a drinker, then there's really no reason to start as far as like risk goes.
Yeah.
But if you are a drinker, there's benefit to cutting back to what they found was lowest risk comes at half to 1 drink per night. And actually the type of drink doesn't matter, even though like the media marketing will have you believe it's red wine, it's like one, two. Actually, that doesn't matter at all, like you said. Yeah. But if you are someone who drinks more, then interestingly, like moderate drinking is defined as 2 drinks per night.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Which to me sounds like hella drinks. Yeah. I'm like, whoa,
14 drinks a week.
That's 210 calories a night.
14 drinks a week.
That's a lot.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Anyway, so that's an interesting side note.
Yeah.
No judgment, but like, I was like, wow, that seems like a lot.
Yeah.
But cutting back to that half a drink, or basically like a drink every other night, has your lowest risk for.
I went to the doctor once and, they're asking all these questions like, how much do you drink? Maybe like 4 or 5 drinks a week. It's like, great, you can go up to 22. And I'm just like, based on your height and weight or whatever. Right. And I'm just like, bro, I'm not drinking 22 drinks a week. Like that is, and that maybe has not always been the case, but like, I mean, I guess, I don't know. I would have to be at like Oktoberfest to drink 22 drinks in a week.
Oh, I would be on the floor.
Yeah. So I guess the point of bringing that up is not to judge you. If you're doing 22 drinks a week and feeling great, go for it. But I do think like the recommendations that you're going to get from your doctor are based on like the standard population, which is frankly pretty unhealthy in this country, right? So like you may want to consider figuring out what your own sort of recommendation is going to be that works for you.
Yeah. That's a really good one. Yeah. Getting to that point of like, well, there's a difference between like health or like the absence of disease and being like fit or optimal or whatnot.
Yeah. So you're saying like basically 1/2 to 1 drink a day, you can still be sort of healthy.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. I guess I would encourage you if you're listening to this and you're like, oh, should I give this up? I would encourage you to think about like your relationship with alcohol.
Yeah.
Like, ask yourself why you feel like you have to have it. There are people that don't drink at all. There are people that go to the same parties that you go to that don't drink.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
For most people.
Yeah.
There are people that go to events at the gym that don't drink. Why do you feel like you have to have it? And when you explore that question, you may come up with a different answer than, hey, don't take my drinks away.
Yeah.
Because that's what it comes down to for me. It's like, why do I feel like I have to have this thing? To unwind or to have a good Saturday afternoon. Because I have had good Saturday afternoons before, Could I do that again?
Yeah.
I would kind of dig into that.
I think that's so good. And that's really where like the real is for a lot of people, I think, who are asking themselves this question and wondering, is that exactly like, what exactly is this giving me? And honestly, that can be a really hard one.
Yeah.
A really hard one to answer.
Yeah.
And sometimes like, a lot of people I think have found that when you stop doing it, even if it's just framed as an experiment for some 2-week or 4-week period of time, actually gets a lot harder before it gets easier.
Yeah. Yeah, and to be clear, for those of you listening to this, if we go to a party and I'm having a drink, it's not that my plan is to never do this again. In fact, that's actually unhelpful. If I think I can never do it again, then all of a sudden my anti-rules thing kicks in where I'm just like, nah, I'm doing it now.
Yeah.
You tell me I can't have it, I'm going to have it. Yeah. Ideally, you would figure out what your relationship is with anything that you feel like you have to have, and then figure out what the right kind of balance is for you.
Yeah.
It might be 0, it might be a lot.
Yeah.
It's likely going to be somewhere in between because life is about all of the experiences. It's not just about having this one thing at this one time.
Yeah, that's so good. So thinking of it from a place of what do I want in my life versus what I want less of.
Yeah.
And kind of like making decisions based on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah. You had a few other questions, or was that the last one about alcohol?
That was the main one. I guess like my other question is just like a personal one, which is like, what do you plan on? I mean, and you were kind of getting at this, but like, so what's your long game? Like you get to the end of the year and then what are you going to do?
Yeah. So right now I feel great. Like it took me about 6 or 8 weeks where I felt like, I don't know, I did a little research on this. It's like alcohol stays in your system for a while,
Yeah.
like, you know, for weeks. And it can take a while for your liver to recover.
Yeah.
And like I started to notice, we didn't talk about this, but I started to notice like 6, 8 weeks in, it's like my aches and pains went away.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, that feels good. And I started training harder and like that felt good. And I'm like, okay, this feels good.
Yeah.
And, you know, I just feel really great and I like that feeling.
Yeah.
So for me, it was pushing till the end of the year. And I don't want to make any promises about what's going to happen next year. But I know that right now my focus is on basically getting in the best shape I can be.
Yeah.
And that means that not drinking is probably going to continue.
Yeah.
Right. I'm also not feeling like I'm missing out on anything.
Yeah.
So, you know,
Yeah.
I can't really answer that question because as soon as I say, I'm never going to drink again,
Right, yeah.
then I'm going to start.
Yeah.
You know, because it's just like, that's one level of awareness. I know if you tell me I can't do something, then that's the only thing that I ever can want to do.
Yeah.
Right.
I think that's a lot of people too.
Yeah.
I think like psychologically having like doors open
Yeah.
is way easier to like almost like continue making the right decision than feeling like this is the only path that I can go on.
Yeah.
It's so funny. Like I was thinking about that, you know, even for when I think about, you know, I have a couple of people who I know of who are looking for jobs, right? They're kind of unhappy in their job, but just the act of like looking and like recognizing that there are opportunities out there is like, okay, I think I'll stick with this one for a little while longer for these reasons.
Yeah.
But as soon as they feel like there's no options out there, then it's like, I just need to fucking get out.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. That's right.
So like psychologically, there's got to be something there.
Yeah. So I guess I look at it like this is a game that I'm playing. And right now, you know, I've been winning for 100 something days in a row. And when I get to the whatever 200 or whatever the end of the year is, I'll probably want to keep winning for another, you know, however many days. Maybe I'll go for a year, maybe 2 years, maybe 5 years.
Yeah.
Who knows? It's a game that I'm playing. I like it.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, it's alongside, it supports all the other games I'm playing,
Yeah.
which is like, you know, training hard and recovering from injury and sleeping well and all the other things,
Yeah.
You know, growing a business. It supports all those other games, right? So if I want to keep winning at those other games, then I'm probably going to keep playing this one.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And, you know, there may be a point where I just flip over the board and say, you know,
Yeah.
let's do a different game.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Right.
So that's how I like to think about it because then it just doesn't feel like something I'm forcing myself to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then for someone who has made that decision, let's say, okay, I'm drinking 3, 4, maybe even drinking 7 times a week, right?
Yep.
And I want to cut down or I want to eliminate it altogether. What would you tell them to kind of
All right.
help
So
get started?
the best framework I've ever come up with for this is something called 10-30-100, right? And the idea here is let's just say you're going from drinking once a week to not drinking. That just makes it easier.
Yeah.
You could also apply this to, you know, drinking 3 nights a week to drinking 1.
Right.
You go from drinking once a week to not drinking. Basically, your goal is to make it 10 days without drinking, right? And so day is just a convenient unit of measurement.
Yeah.
But basically, if you can go 10 days without drinking, that proves to yourself you can get through a full week and a half without making this choice. And it tells you whether you can fit this into your life or not. It takes discipline and willpower to get through those first 10 days, right? That's the only thing you're going for is can you fit this into your life?
Yeah.
That's the 10.
Yeah.
The next is the 30. So if you make it through the 10, if you don't make it through the 10, then you can either, and actually it's hard to make it through the 10,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
If you don't make it through the 10, then you can either start over. Like let's say you go for a week and then Friday you go out and drink. Great. You can start over on Saturday and go for another 10, right?
Yeah.
Or you can renegotiate, try something else for 10. But do not shame yourself for falling off because it's expected that you're not going to make it in those first 10 days.
So those 10 are like, let me learn where my sticking points are.
Yeah, exactly. It's hard.
Yeah.
It's really hard.
Yeah.
Right? Anything that you do that requires change is going to be hard. And so that's why I like this framework of just going for 10 days because you can literally like grind your way into doing it for 10
Yeah.
days.
Yeah.
Right? So you grind into doing it for 10 days. You're probably not going to feel much benefit. It's probably going to suck. but you can decide whether you can continue it. If you decide you're going to continue it, commit to doing it for another 30 days, right? That's only if you decide.
Yeah.
So now you do it for 30 more days. And again, it takes some grinding, but not as much as the first 10 days. It's really hard, but not, it's hard, but it's not really hard.
Yeah.
But if you do it for 10 days plus another 30 days, now you've done it for 40 days, you will start to see real benefits. 6 weeks is about the amount of time that it takes to like your body to adjust to some sort of dietary change.
Yeah.
And like getting rid of alcohol is like a dietary change. So you do it 6 weeks, you start to feel better.
Yeah.
And you start to feel some of the benefits. And then you're deciding with a clear head, is this something that I would like to continue? And if it is, then what I like to do is push it for another 60 days, right? So we've done 10 at the beginning, plus another 30, and then 60 for a total of 100.
Yeah.
Because in 100 days, you can change just about anything, right? Like I've seen people lose like 50 pounds in 100 days.
Yeah.
Like, don't try that at home, but like it happens,
Yeah.
right? And like, even if let's say your goal is to lose 50 pounds and you lose like 25 pounds in 100 days, you are so far down the path. Like you've kind of changed your life at that point.
Yeah.
You can go from, living here in California, working for, whatever, the government, to moving to Nepal and volunteering to build houses in 100 days, right? Like everything can change in 100 days.
Yeah.
And so if you're going to make this commitment, grind through the 10, push through that extra 30 to get to 40, see some results, decide if you want to continue. And if you do, commit to doing another 60. And then you will have changed your life, or it won't have made that much difference. And you'll be like, why did I put so much effort into this?
Right.
Let me just go back to doing it.
Yeah.
Right. But at least then you'll know. You have a clear head. Like, this is what life is like.
Yeah.
Right. That's the way that I like to approach it. Right.
Yeah, and I love this because it's not saying I'm never going to do this thing again, or I'm not going to do this thing for some indefinite amount of time. It's like I'm committing, but I'm fully committing to these 10 days. And that means I'm looking at my calendar and I'm anticipating, oh, my friend's got a wedding on this day.
Yep.
So what are some things I'm going to have to like be thinking about or anticipating going into that? Oh, this is going to go over my mom's birthday or whatnot. Like I'm imagining some interactions that are going to be had around that. Right. Oh, my friends are doing a holiday party. So like I'm imagining how I'm going to, so like it requires you then having to imagine your behavior through these different scenarios, but it's not saying that at every holiday gathering or every wedding, I'm not doing this. Yeah. It's like a little small test of, can I puzzle through how to specifically endure or pass or whatever this situation. And then at the 10-day mark or at the 30-day mark, it's like I get to choose that again or not.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah. And I think that goes for any changes that you're making, in your life. It's like, if you look at it as this like 10, 30, 100, I mean, it's not like the holy grail, but it at least gets you so far down the path where you can like think about it and like evaluate if this is something you'd like to do.
Oh yeah. I mean, I remember we were talking not that long about tracking food. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do this thing because I believe it may have some value. But at least for me, then I was like, I'm only doing it 7 days. 7 days. That's all I'm committing to. I was very adamant about that. Like, don't make me do it for more than that. And I did it for 7 days. I was like, there is some benefit. I'm going to continue doing it for another X period of time. Right. But I don't think I would have made that change had I not defined the time period for myself at first. You know, that was important. It gave me an out. You know?
That face you made, that reaction is like, that's like, I see that reaction at least 3 times a week. It's like, that thing you've been telling me for 3 years. Fine. I did it and it worked. I hate you.
And that's it. And it's like, but that's why I think it's so valuable for you to share this. It's like, this is a thing that I tried. And it's not saying that anyone else should try this. It's like, hey, here's a thing that I was thinking about in terms of like where I'm at in my life and what my goals are and some of the things that I'm noticing. I'm going to try this thing. And if that plants a seed in somebody else's head of like, maybe this is a similar thing that I'm going through. Maybe it's worth a shot. Then great.
Absolutely. And like, this is one of the things, part of the reason why I've been doing this for 15 years, whatever, is because I've tried a lot of the stuff. And it's like, I can tell you exactly what it feels like from day 1 to day 1,000 of, losing 100 pounds or day 1 to 1,000 of like figuring out how to do a pull-up or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And I think what I've realized is like, there's so much great information out there, but none of it matters.
Yeah.
Until you actually do something,
Yeah.
until you actually take some steps, you take some actions, you get some sort of outcome, you see if it works for you.
Yeah.
That's when the information actually, like when you actually learn something.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Well, I think that's
it. Let's wrap it
all
up.
I got. Yeah. But I'm just super grateful that you were sharing, like open and sharing this today. So
Yeah. Yeah. And, I think this is one that, given our society, like people, is something that people wrestle with a lot.
yeah.
And I think what's important here is that you are able to figure out what works for you.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
like what people think you should do
Right.
or,
Yeah.
what even you think you should do.
Yeah.
It's like what actually works for you in your real life.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
There was a fun, as I was like playing around with researching this, if you were to guess what percentage of people, adults in industrialized countries drink?
I want to spoil this because I think I saw your notes. Was it 70%?
70%.
Yeah.
70%.
Yeah.
What is that like? To me, that feels like a lot.
I mean,
That's way more than most people.
really, if you think about it, how do you define drink? Like drink ever?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah.
Is it once a week? Is it once a month? Is it once in a lifetime?
Yeah. I don't know.
Right. Well, if you have an answer, then you can send us
Okay.
an email.
Yeah. Write in, comment below. How are we talking? Every day?
70% of people drink every day.
Every day.
Yeah.
But point is, like, it is a little bit of the ocean that we swim in. It's like, it's the water that we swim in. And so it's like very normal if this is the thing that you do, or a thing that you like question.
Yeah.
And you're not wrong for doing it, and you're not wrong or you're not right for not doing it, right?
Yeah.
It's just exactly like you said, what works for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Awesome.
Well, thanks. Y'all, thank you very much. Got questions? Hit us up on the DMs. And
We don't have any DMs.
Oh.
Just send us an email.
Just send us an email. Slide into the comments.
Yeah, put a comment.
Put a comment. But thanks, you guys, for listening, and we'll do it again next week.
All right, awesome.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in. If you like this episode, we've got plenty of others. Go check out this one over here.